The theme of this year's meeting, Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability, points the way. Over the next 2 days, I will call on G20 members to use their leverage to lead the action we need. First, we need economic action. Developing countries, in particular in Africa, are suffering from a perfect storm of shrinking fiscal space, crashing debt burdens, and a global financial architecture that is failing to support or even represent them adequately. Africa has been a double victim of colonialism, first through centuries of exploitation and plunder, and then again when international institutions were created, when most countries, African countries, were still under colonial rule and their voices were absent from the table. Today, Africa remains woefully underrepresented across global institutions, and this must change. The Pact for the Future, adopted by member states last year, called for a reform of global financial institutions. Many decisions are disproportionately in the hands of some of the members of G20 across the governance bodies of these institutions. Africa must have a fair seat in every forum where decisions are made, from the board of international financial institutions to permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council and to other global bodies. And the G20 can help repair this historic injustice and drive reforms that give developing countries, and Africa in particular, a real voice in shaping global policies and make global economic governance more inclusive, representative, equitable, and effective in the years ahead. Africa should be at the heart of this clean energy revolution. The continent holds immense solar and wind potential, but lacks the investments needed to harness them. A just energy transition must also mean to entirely electrify Africa, powering homes, schools, clinics and industries, and creating decent jobs for its young people. No one should be left in the dark by the clean energy age, least of all a continent that has contributed the least to the climate crisis. The economics are on our side, but political will needs to catch up. Finally, we need action for peace. I will call on G20 members to use their influence and voices to end the conflicts that are causing so much death, destruction, and destabilization around the world. We need peace in Sudan, through ending the carnage and an immediate cessation of hostilities, through the safe, unimpeded, and rapid delivery of humanitarian aid to civilians in need in the whole of Sudan. By ending the flow of weapons and fighters into Sudan by external parties, and by both the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces coming to the negotiating table. We need peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo through a lasting solution that respects the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity while addressing the root causes of the instability and violence. We need security and peace in the Sahel. Armed groups and terrorist networks continue to exploit fragile governance and intercommunal tensions, fueling cycles of violence that have displaced millions and destabilized entire communities. The alarming developments in Mali are making a dramatic situation even worse, presenting new risks to the wider region and the entire continent. Addressing the dire security situation means taking action to urgently restore trust and strengthen cooperation between countries across the region. It's time for the countries of the region to stand together and deliver the stability, hope and peace that people across the Sahel need and deserve. And we need a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace in Ukraine, in accordance with the UN Charter, international law and the resolutions of the General Assembly. I first of all pay tribute to the leadership of President Ramaphosa. I think he has put on the table all the issues that matter in relation to the needs, the financial and economic needs of developing countries in general and African countries in particular. But the G20 is an informal gathering that decides by consensus. And obviously, one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today is to put pressure on the G20 to do exactly the kind of reforms that are necessary for the perspectives of development and the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in the African continent to become a reality. The system, as it works today, is unfair and ineffective. And I've been saying time and time again that the present international financial architecture was designed by a group of developed countries and essentially adapted to the needs of their economies. It's time to have a real global international financial system whose main preoccupation should be address the challenges that developing countries face. Will the G20 be able to move in that direction? We'll see. But I think South Africa has done its part, putting those things clearly on the table.
You mentioned, talked about sustainable and comprehensive peace plan in Ukraine. I just wanted to know what's your overall assessment of the 28 peace plan that has been brokered by the US. Do you have some of the issues that are promising in that peace plan, and do you have some that you think still need more discussion?
Well, first of all, we don't know what the peace plan is. I just read on the papers that Russia has not yet received any peace plan. So we are talking about something that is in the press, but was never presented formally by the United States or by any other entity. For us, as UN, the criteria of any peace plan are always based in the values of the Charter and international law. And so obviously for us, a peace solution for the Ukraine that is in line with these principles would also abide by the resolutions of the General Assembly that have clearly indicated that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine and in general around the world, the territorial integrity of states must be respected. I just said the same about the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Well, there might have been that event. It's the first time I hear about it. We had a very important summit in Nigeria on counterterrorism, so it's not our intention at all to make Nigeria not present in all our discussions. And for us, I believe, if you look at what is today the senior management of the UN, you will see that that senior management is quite balanced globally. And at the same time, if you look at the programs of action of most of the UN entities, they are essentially focused on the interests of developing countries. But there is one problem that I cannot solve, because when people look at the UN, many people do not see the humanitarian work that we do, sometimes in extremely difficult circumstances. 400 of our staff was killed in Gaza. People do not see our effort in pushing for the reform of the international financial architecture. People do not see our efforts in pushing for climate action and climate justice, or our efforts in relation to gender equality. People see the Security Council. That's what appears in the headlines. And obviously, the Security Council is something created long ago and represents a world that no longer exists. There are no permanent representatives from Africa or from Latin America. And there are 3 European permanent representatives: the UK, France, and Russia. People might argue, but Russia is essentially a European country. It has also an Asian part, but its center is in Europe. I mean, this is totally at odds with the reality of today's world. And so, one thing I can guarantee is that in the action of the Secretariat of the UN, we will be doing everything to correct inequalities and injustices and to guarantee effective representation to developing countries. But we have not the power to reform the Security Council or to reform the IMF or the World Bank. All this depends on the will of member states. And usually those that have power are quite reluctant in accepting a redistribution of that power.